picture of the author in the back of the book. Oh gosh. Okay, well. Anyway, hello. So it is again already time for another monthly wrap up. I cannot believe it is the end of February already. So I read 8 books this month, and I also have an honorary mention for the end. So this is not going to be in any particular order, just because I don't even remember, to be completely real with you. Several of these books I did do a whole video about, going into detail, just because I had a lot of really, I don't know, for me, there was a lot of really interesting books that I read this month, so I ended up delving into them more and doing whole videos about just one book. So I won't, spend too much time on those. The audiobook that I listened to this month is Leviathan Wakes. So that what I talked about in my last video, a brief synopsis. So Leviathan Wakes is by James S.A. Corey. The audiobook that I've been listening to is narrated by Jefferson Mays. I guess to specify, this is a sci-fi novel. Now, the basic plot of this is that you have dual perspectives. You have a detective who is investigating the case of a missing young woman. Her family is looking for her. They want her to come home, and he gets put on the case to track her down and drag her home, basically. So you have his perspective with what starts off as this kind of side job, and then you also have this other man who ends up being the captain of this ship, and he and his crew just repeatedly end up being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Things just build on each other and end up getting involved in this huge thing that has to do with interplanetary relations and possibly different planets going to war. It is fantastic. It is one of 9 books. So I don't want to spend too much time on it since I did that whole video, but I will just say that it is, if you have any interest in sci-fi whatsoever, or if you like audiobooks, I really couldn't recommend it enough if, that's the right genre for you. It's, I was so pleasantly surprised. I'm currently listening to the next book in the series. The next one I want to talk about is called To Be Devoured by Sara Tantlinger. This one I read on the Kindle app on my phone. This is a relatively short book. The plot of this is a mentally ill woman becomes obsessed with vultures. She becomes obsessed with the idea of eating raw flesh. She doesn't want to go to the store and buy raw meat. She wants to eat it, directly from the source. And I hesitate, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think that it's not too much of a reach to figure out where this might go. And I just have to say, I enjoyed the story well enough. The concept was so interesting, but then I was really distracted by the fact that if you think about it, any animal that eats meat kills its prey and then eats it. The one thing that sets vultures apart from those animals is the fact that they don't kill their prey, that they wait for it to die on its own. That's their thing. That's what makes them unique compared to those other animals. And so you would think that if this woman is obsessed with vultures, then she would pay more attention to that being their thing, I guess realistically, if you're mentally ill, you're not going to expect people to be super logical. Why vultures if you're not going to do what they do? If you kill an animal yourself, then you are specifically not being vulture-like. You get what I'm saying? Do you understand? You know what I mean? I don't know, it kind of threw me a bit. And I guess I would have been more forgiving of that had the book itself maybe just presented her as being a complete nut job. And I don't want to spoil the ending, so I'll just say, this story, you could have a more realistic ending to the book, or you could have a more kind of poetic ending. And it did have one of those, and I wished it had had the other. For me, the concept was really interesting. I didn't dislike reading it. I enjoyed the process of reading it, but as far as how I feel about the story itself after I was done, it didn't, I don't know, it didn't really leave me feeling satisfied, I guess I'll say. So the next one was my library book for the month. So this is Slewfoot by Brom, A Tale of Bewitchery. So this one is, for me, 5 stars. I enjoyed this so much. I would say, besides Leviathan Wakes, which obviously it's a different genre and I listened to it, but this is probably my second favorite read of the month. It's my favorite horror book of the month for sure. The plot of Slewfoot is that you have this woman who marries this man during, Puritan times. She is not from this community. She gets brought in from elsewhere, and he marries her, and she doesn't really fit in with these people because she wasn't raised there. So she's not the quiet, submissive, the way that the other women in this community are. So she causes a ruckus. She causes a lot of grief for her husband because she doesn't, behave or whatever. And then when he dies, she doesn't really have a lot of people on her side because she does not behave the way that they feel like she should. So in that situation, she ends up accepting help from this sort of a spirit, for lack of a better word. You don't really know for sure what this creature is. That's kind of part of the book, is that you have like this mystical creature. The creature isn't really sure who they are, but she accepts their help trying to survive. And it just sort of, just things get crazy. Things get crazy. It's very much about the, the witch hunts, the way that women who didn't fall in line were treated and all of that. So well written. As you're going through the story, there are definitely a lot of emotions that feel very potent. She has complicated feelings around the idea of accepting help from this spirit creature thing. Ironically, she wasn't doing that before, but because she was treated like an outcast, then she turned to that. There's illustrations in this book that I also really enjoyed of some of the main characters. You have like our main character, and just like these weird creatures. And I've seen that book around a lot. So when I saw it at the library, I was like, heck yes, let's do it. Now, next up, Scary Snippets Valentine's Day Edition. And this is by a lot of different authors. The back of the book just has all of the author biographies, and there's a bunch of them. So I can't name all of them. But it's exactly what it sounds like. It is just very, very short little snippets, sometimes 2 pages. As you would expect, it's very hit or miss. So the stories from this book kind of range. Some of them are more silly. One of the ones I thought was cute was kind of like a werewolf story, only instead of a person turning into a werewolf, it's about a teddy bear that turns into a real bear. So it's like, they all have that kind of scary, creepy undertone, but some of them are pretty silly and lighthearted. Other ones are more serious. There was another one that stood out to me that was about a woman in an abusive relationship, that her husband was very insistent that women are to serve men, and so her response to that was to murder him and then cut him up and cook him and serve him to her guests at her table as food. So she was, serving him. Still, obviously, like a silly execution, a silly, connection there, but obviously the base of the story is more serious. Overall, I think I didn't dislike the book. I mean, I don't know how I could, it's so hit or miss, but I think I did learn from reading this that stories this short just really aren't my thing. You don't really have enough time to care about anything, and I just didn't find it very satisfying to read them. But you know, if you like that sort of thing, because some people really do, then you know, maybe you would like it, because they do different editions for these scary snippets. They have like a Christmas edition and stuff, so I probably won't be getting them, but if you're into that, then you know, there you go. Okay, so next one I won't spend a ton of time on since I did a whole video about it, but I did read Girl Flesh by May Leach. The basic premise of the story is that you have two women who are sort of micro celebrities. They find themselves locked in a hotel room together. They don't know why they're there. They don't remember how they got there. And it kind of turns into this survival story of them trying to escape. And the whole process of this, it becomes very much like a self-discovery story, and also their feelings for each other develops, which is not really a spoiler. It says on the book, an extreme horror book about love, you know, so it's not a spoiler, it's right there. Their feelings for each other and kind of what they come to represent for each other. They come to represent sort of the life that they haven't been allowed to live. If they could really just be their true, most base, authentic selves, how could they live their lives? How much more fulfilling it would be to be able to live that way if they were willing to turn their back on the life that they already have. Even though I did enjoy the romantic relationship in the book, personally, I enjoyed sort of the self-analyzation that was happening throughout the book more. That was what I got the most out of when I was reading it, was kind of just the inner dialogue that the main character was having. But I like survival stories, and I like this story a lot. So that's why I ended up doing a whole video kind of diving into it a little bit more. Okay, the next one that I was also initially intending to do for Valentine's Day, because it is called Valentine. It is called Valentine by Elizabeth Wetmore. It was a good book, but it was not a horror book. It was kind of just like a regular nonfiction drama story. So the plot of this one is, it's kind of hard to tell you the plot, because it basically is all these different perspectives from these different women who live in this town. 1976 in Odessa, Texas. The initial occurrence is that this young Hispanic girl is assaulted by this man, and she ends up running away and finds this house that she can run to trying to get help. And the woman who lives there is home alone with her children. She does end up letting the girl come in, and then when the man tries to come to the house because he, you know, believes that the girl ran there, you know, this woman is kind of trying to protect this girl who is a stranger to her, but also, you know, her children are inside, and that's how the book starts. And so I kind of thought that was going to be like the plot of the book. However, it kind of acts more as just sort of the timeline more than anything. That's where the book starts, and then throughout that happening, and then the trial and all of that stuff, that is sort of the time frame that we are reading about. And you read about the perspective from the girl, you read the perspective from the woman who's in the house, but then there's also these other women in the town who, you know, the neighbor and the you know, another young girl who is living in the town who her mother ran away and left her. There's all these different relationships that don't directly affect the beginning story, if that makes sense. They're just sort of happening at the same time. There is little bits of overlap. These characters know each other, they talk to each other, but a lot of it, you know, one character, it talks a lot about her husband who passed away and her trying to figure out how to exist on her own and by herself. And another, a young girl, her mother abandoned her, so it's just her now with her father, but she's left on her own a lot of the time. So you have all these different characters. I got a little frustrated when I started it because it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So when I kept every new chapter, it was like a new character, and I was like, who the hell are all of these people? But then as soon as I got to the point where, okay, like you've been introduced to all the characters, and then I started seeing some of the same names again, finally I started to simmer down. The only thing I don't want to say I didn't like it, but the only thing that I specifically wish had been different was the ending. About 2 chapters before the end of this book, there was this really beautiful build, and I started crying. I was ugly crying at this part of the book, and then it kept going. Like I cried, and it felt so powerful, and then I had to just sit there and keep reading for 2 chapters, and I felt so deflated by that. It's not that the last 2 chapters were bad, it's just they felt so unnecessary, I guess. Like the ending to me would have been so much more powerful if they had like chopped off the past. I think it was like 2 chapters. It wasn't like a lot, but it's still, I don't know, the ending wasn't as powerful as I feel it could have been had it ended a little bit sooner. After that, my investment was a lot lower because my emotions had peaked, and I wanted to be done now. That being said though, if you want, you know, something that's a little bit more of a drama, if you are literally anybody else on the planet besides the person that I just described, then I would sit this one out, to be perfectly honest with you. This is not for the faint of heart. The title is not a euphemism. So I guess to try to summarize, okay, so this is about a man. He is in an incestuous relationship with his mother and sister. Yeah, the title is not a euphemism. It is also arguably not the worst thing that happens, that he does. So there's a lot of things like that, and worse, possibly, subjectively, worse things happening to babies. So I would not recommend that for most people. And that's all I have to say about that. I do have more thoughts in that video that is specifically about this book. And the final book that I read this month is American Psycho by Easton, Ellis. So obviously very, very well-known book and movie, but if you are not familiar with the plot, then I will say it is about a man named Patrick Bateman. He is a wealthy Wall Street playboy guy, living the American dream. But he's living the American dream, but he's also a psycho. You know, you read it. It's very intentionally not clear if this man is actually committing acts of violence, or if he is severely mentally ill and just having very vivid fantasies, hallucinations, delusions, whatever. So it's kind of subjective as far as what you think is real versus not real. Personally, me reading this, I read this as it being like in his head, but I know that there's, you know, again, it's very subjective. The things about this book is that the things that it does are done on purpose, okay? The author goes in with the intention, very clearly to me, the intention of making this lavish, luxurious lifestyle seem very boring. He focuses a lot on, you always know what people are wearing in every scene. It focuses a lot on those sorts of superficial things. Exactly what people are wearing, what fancy restaurant they're going to, what fancy meal they're eating at the restaurant. Oh, this beautiful woman, this is what her body looks like. Just all of these things that people associate with that luxurious lifestyle. He goes into so much detail about, very intentionally so, with the intention, I believe, to make it boring, basically, that it's supposed to be this big exciting life, but actually when you are in it, it just becomes ordinary and it's not that exciting anymore. For me personally, it's almost too effective, because even though I recognize its purpose, that this man is living the American dream, but he's bored with life, like all these inane, stupid things just become boring, and eventually, even when he becomes violent in his head or in real life, whatever, even that kind of becomes boring. It's just all feelings feel muted, and it's just nothing really resonates. Everything feels empty. And so it's effective, but it doesn't change the fact that it's not always fun to read, because sometimes it is boring. You know what I mean? Like, it's meant to be boring to show that it's boring, but the result of that is that it is boring, you know? That being said, I am definitely in the minority there. I know that this book is very well loved. I haven't gotten a chance to watch the movie again, but I want to. I hopefully will get to do that this weekend. So yeah, I guess I respect the book. I respect the vision. I'm just not sure that it was really quite my cup of tea as far as me enjoying the process of reading it, if that makes sense. Okay, so the other thing that I have to mention is that I did have the intention of every month picking a new Stephen King book to read. Now, unfortunately, I did not finish Lisi's story in time to talk about it in this video, so I'm a little bit behind, but I am still going to pick my next Stephen King book, and then hopefully next month I will be able to catch up and just review both books and get back on schedule. So, I have my sushi pencil case. You can see. Give her a spin. I have to finish Lisi's story and my March pick. Is this just one? Okay. My March pick is, Desperation. So, Desperation will be my March pick for Stephen King, and then I will also finish Lisi's story, so I can talk about that as well. It's a big book. They're big books in my defense, okay? That is it for my February reading wrap-up. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around.